Hi everyone, it's Ran here. Welcome to my room, guys. Hope you are well today and enjoying your New Year's resolutions, whatever they may be. I figured I might share with you a little bit about my own INFJ journey, particularly, the story of how I became INFJ, so to speak. Of course, as Nietzsche would have said, in becoming INFJ, I might have become who I always was, but nevertheless, there is always, for all of us who identify as INFJ, a moment when we decide that we are INFJs, and this comes to color the rest of our experience. This is an interesting philosophical reflection, because it does mean that when your self-description is updated in some way or other, the quality of your experience after the integration of that new element of self-description, such as I identify as INFJ, the color of your experience after that changes, even though you may have been INFJ the whole time. In other words, the phenomenology of your own life is no longer quite the same. Something to think about. Anyway, now before I move on with my topic, since we're going to talk about this so interesting as ever type, don't forget that you can get my book on the INFJ, the Ecstatic Soul. It's a bestseller, guys. More than 2,000 copies sold. If you haven't got a copy, have a look. It's less than $10 at the links below. Look at the reviews. This might just be the book you need to get if you want to understand this type. Sequel, hopefully, this year now. So pressure's on me. I have also written a book of fiction called The Infinite Castle, which is not a book about INFJs as such, but the rumor has it the main character is an INFJ. Now, it's a novel. And if you like Kafka, Dostoevsky, Murakami, and all these great writers, well, you might just like it. Support the channel as well. Less than $10, link below. Less than $10, I meant. And you can also support me on Patreon, of course. Thank you so much to my supporters. Your support means a lot and helps the channel going. Okay, and we have a growing community there, which I hope you will join and contribute to. Now, I thought this video about my journey toward the INFJ type, toward becoming an INFJ, toward becoming who I always was, and thereby changing the color of my experience as a human being ever so slightly or ever so much, might be useful to you guys, not just because, well, it could be informative in and of itself, but also because I meant it as an illustration of the fact that coming to identify as an INFJ need not be a very straightforward journey. And if your journey towards it has not been super straightforward, has not been without its periods of doubt, maybe still haunted by doubt about possibly being mistyped, possibly being the victim of vanity, or without, unbeknownst to oneself, or wanting to be a type that we're not really, and we're afraid that we're imposters and we might be found out, or, this is something that happens to more people than you think. And it's happened to me, admittedly, a little bit less the case for the last couple of years, but let's not forget, I have identified as an INFJ for now something like 6 years, so it's been a while. But I am 36, I'll be 37 in April. So it means that I only started identifying as an INFJ at 30. In fact, in view of you guys in the audience, this might be a less long, like a shorter time than most of you guys, which is an interesting reflection because you could actually argue, and this is not really up to me, but this is kind of an observation that I am sharing with you on the basis of some, observation of discussions online and particular typings on various websites, such as Personality Database, and discussions on Discord, and obviously YouTube channel comments. I think that if you were to take at the entire INFJ community on the internet, and maybe more specifically on YouTube, like I'm probably one of the names that will pop up. Like maybe I'm being optimistic, maybe I'm being realistic. I leave that to your own judgments, but I probably would come up in the first 10 names of INFJs online, right? Myself, Ren Contini. I'm probably, if people are used to looking at INFJs online and they're asked to, list the first 10 names they can think of, it's quite likely, I think, that I will crop up in that list, right? There's of course other names that will crop up, but I think, I might not be top of the list, but I probably will be in that list. In other words, I'm a relatively, at my own niche level, of course, a relatively well-known INFJ online at this stage for people who take an interest in the topic. My channel contributed to it, my book contributed to it, no doubt. Now, that doesn't mean that there are not people who still doubt that I am actually an INFJ. It still happens from time to time. Now, there's two possible explanations for that. Well, actually, in fact, there's three possible explanations for that. The first explanation, which ought to be kept in mind, although I leave it up to your judgment whether it is likely or not, is that I am simply mistaken and that I'm really another type. Now, there's two sub-hypotheses to this. Either I am sincerely mistaken about my type, or I am deceitful and deliberately misleading people because I have something to gain by continuing to be identified as that type, namely a channel, a Patreon page, my books, and so on. The second possibility is that the person or the people who say that I'm of another type, and the most common types that are suggested for me, interestingly also, this is something I want to share with you, they've changed over time in terms of how I'm perceived by the broader community of those who don't think I'm an INFJ. Because again, I have to reiterate that I'm fortunate in that I have mostly been considered an INFJ from the start. It's something that probably, I should consider myself lucky, because there's often a hunt for, fake INFJs. Initially, people were often saying that I was more likely an INTP. This is the type that came up the most, as well as INTJ came up a little bit less often, but probably second, and then ENFP. Very little connection between these three types, but those were the three types that came up the most. Nowadays, I think that it's mostly ENFJ, and well, this might be connected to the third reason, and the third reason is that the people that are typing me based on another system and then applying it to the MBTI system, even though there's no complete 100% overlap. And it is true that in other systems I do type as an ENFJ, and it would appear possibly a possibility, at any rate, that according to yet another system, I would type as an ISTJ. Not, mind you, as an INTJ in MBTI, but as an ISTJ in that system, as ITS, or whatever that means. For ENFJ, it's actually FENI according to cognitive type. But that's, again, it's a mistake to assume that there is 100% overlap. You could be an INFJ in one system and these different types in other systems. But all this is to say that if you're ever assailed by doubts about your type, just remind yourself that even people who are seemingly, like myself, not universally but broadly acknowledged to be public, well-recognized INFJs, seen as legitimate enough that people follow their channels, buy their books, and so on and so forth, listen to their podcasts for those who have that, even they are often challenged. Now, it's less the case for me, but it was certainly more the case, not only in the earlier phase of my YouTube career, but particularly in the first year or so. The first year or so was tough. First of all, there were doubts that I had about myself. I've said in other videos before that I first typed as an INFP when I simply took the test, right? From conversations with friends. At that time, it was not yet online conversations. It was people who had introduced me to the test in everyday life. They said, INFP, yeah, kind of, you have some stuff in common with INFPs, but take it again or whatever, because I'm not sure. Then I got INTP, and I seemed pretty happy with INTP. And then like a colleague of mine, an ESTP in fact, said to me, well, there's that whole section of the description of INTPs where it just doesn't sound like you. This is where, at first, I rejected the whole system as bogus, and I just no longer paid attention. Then another friend of mine, it turned out, we had a night out and had a few drinks, and it turns out he was very invested in that framework, and he had done a lot of research. He had even started looking into the cognitive functions. This was my introduction to the cognitive functions. Then, eventually, I realized that, okay, I actually was not an INTP. So I started investigating again, eventually identified that, first of all, my connection was not with INFJ, but with the NI function. And my friend said, yes, I think that NI is really what defines you. So, of course, I was still under the influence of the test. So I thought, okay, I'm someone who's quite analytical, thinking, so on. So I'm probably a T-type, a lot of us start like that. So I identified as an INTJ. And then that lasted for probably a couple of months. And then that was before I even started my channel, I think. Yeah, of course, because I started my channel when I sort of felt confident enough that I was an INFJ. And then turned out, well, FI, I'm not too sure about that. And INTJs, I compare myself with INTJs that seem quite, legit in my, again, real life, not yet on the internet. And I said, okay, maybe I'm something else. It took me such a long time to come around to the INFJ type, partly because I'd been misled about the descriptions online that were so mythologized that I thought there was no chance I could ever be that. It's only when I started taking a cold look at it through the use of the cognitive functions and some of Jung's essays that I came to realize, actually, that is the best fit for my type. It took many months, and even when I started making videos, there were people, in the comments that challenged my type way more than they do now. But there were also people in my life who became aware of the YouTube content I was producing. And there's particularly someone that had been dating. In fact, it's an ex-girlfriend of mine, dated for a few years. It was a bumpy relationship. It was in many ways a toxic relationship. And that person we were broken up by that time, but I remember they texted me and they said, because that person identifies as an INFJ and might well be an INFJ, by the way, but they texted me and they said, by the way, we're not really in touch, but I just wanted to tell you, you're not an INFJ. What are you doing? You're obviously an unhealthy ENFP. So back to the whole ENFP thing. And because I've been very susceptible to her influence for many years, and I won't go into the details of that because it's painful and might not be as much of interest as other stuff, I started really thinking, ENFP just sounded really distant, but I thought to myself, can I be a fraud? Self-doubt came back. And that even was the case when I was releasing my first 50, 60 videos, still at the back of my mind. Am I a fraud? Is she right? Are other people right? It's only over time, really just over time, you simply realize that you continue making sense of your experiences and your interactions with others through that prism. And you're never really led to such a level of mismatch between what the description offers you and the success of it in terms of explaining your experiences. You don't get to the level of mismatch where you want to change. I said, no, INFJ works well enough. I'll keep it, thank you. Whereas in every other case, I'd used the description, the INTP, INTJ, and so on. And there was always a situation where there was a breakdown. I said, no, I can't make use of the description to account for this particular experience, whether it's subjective experience, social, personal, whatever it might be, emotional, relationship. With INFJ, the theoretical baggage and the conceptual baggage that the term possesses has allowed me to make more or less, by and large, sense of everything. And over time, it gained that legitimacy and that credibility because it has proven to be a really, really useful instrument to make sense of my life. So it takes time, and it's been a journey for me. So if you ever experience doubts, maybe my experience, as I have related it here, in its various facets, will be of help. Don't fret if you experience self-doubt. Remember, it's a long journey. There might be twists and turns, but you will come to the truth eventually. Okay, let me know in the comments what you think about this, guys. And I will talk to you tomorrow about certainly something else. All right, take care. Bye-bye.